The envelope was already on the table when Nadia walked in. She had not been told what the meeting was about. His assistant had called her the evening before, voice flat and rehearsed, saying only that Mr. Elliot Crawford wanted to speak with her at 9 in the morning. She had assumed it was about the Meridian campaign. She had spent the night going over notes. She had ironed her best blazer. She had arrived 3 minutes early because that was who she was. A woman who prepared, who showed up, who believed that readiness was its own kind of armor. The armor did not help. There were 3 men in the conference room on the 41st floor, and not one of them was Elliot. They introduced themselves as legal representatives. Their names went through her head and fell out the other side. The envelope sat in the center of the long glass table, like something none of them wanted to touch first. Her name was written on the front of it in plain black ink. The handwriting was not Elliot's. It had been addressed by someone paid to write names on envelopes, so that the man whose name it represented would not have to. She sat down. She did not reach for the envelope. She waited. One of the lawyers, the one with silver hair and a practiced calm that came from years of delivering news that destroyed people gently, slid the envelope toward her. "Ms. Osei," he said, "Mr. Crawford asked us to facilitate this conversation on his behalf." He could not come himself, she said. It was not a question. He felt it would be more comfortable for everyone involved if the process was handled professionally. Nadia looked at the envelope. She thought about the word comfortable. She thought about how people used that word when they meant the opposite, when they meant clean, when they meant quick, when they meant, "I do not want to watch your face when you find out." She opened the envelope. Inside was a single document, folded in thirds. A cashier's check slid out first, and landed on the glass table face up. She looked at the number. She read it twice. Then she put it down and read the document. It was 44 pages long. She did not read all 44 pages in that room. She read enough. She read the words non-disclosure, the words mutual separation, the words future claims, the words consideration in the amount of. She read the place where she was supposed to sign. She read the clause that said she could not speak about this arrangement to any person, in any format, in any country, for the rest of her natural life. Her hands were steady. She was proud of that later. In that moment, she simply noticed it, the way you notice strange things when the world is rearranging itself around you. "I am 8 weeks pregnant," she said. The silver-haired lawyer did not move. "Mr. Crawford is aware," he said. She looked up from the document. "He is aware." "Yes. And this is his response. This is his offer." "Yes." She thought about the night she had planned to tell Elliot. She had rehearsed the words. She had chosen a quiet restaurant, a corner table, a Tuesday, because Tuesday felt less dramatic than a weekend. She had never gotten the call made. His assistant had reached her first. And now here she was, sitting across from 3 men in expensive suits, holding a document that told her exactly what kind of man she had spent 11 months believing she understood. She looked at the check again. $20 million. She had grown up in a house where $20,000 felt like rescue. 20 million was a number that existed in a different world entirely, the kind of number that appeared in news articles and legal settlements, and the lives of people who were not Nadia Osei from Atlanta, Georgia, daughter of a retired schoolteacher, and a man who fixed air conditioning units for a living. She understood what she was being offered. She also understood what she was being asked to give. "If I sign this," she said, "and I have children, this agreement covers them as well. The terms are comprehensive, yes. Meaning my children cannot one day come forward. Meaning the agreement is binding on all parties within your immediate household. Yes." She set the document down. She looked at the window. Chicago in February was the color of old pewter, the lake barely visible through the low clouds, the city going about its business 41 floors below, without any awareness that a woman's life was being reorganized on its behalf. She thought about what $20 million meant practically. It meant her mother did not have to work anymore. It meant the debt she had carried since graduate school disappeared. It meant she could build something real, something that was entirely hers, without needing anyone's permission or investment or goodwill. It meant her children, 2 of them she already knew, twins confirmed at 6 weeks, would never go without anything. She thought about what it cost. It cost her the right to tell the truth for the rest of her life. She picked up the pen the lawyer had placed beside the document. She thought, for one long moment, about putting it back down, about standing up and walking out, and letting this play out differently, loudly, publicly, the way it deserved to play out. She did not do that. She signed. She told herself she signed for her children. She told herself the world Elliot Crawford occupied was a world that had resources she did not have, lawyers she could not afford, and a reach that extended in directions she had not yet imagined. She told herself that $20 million and a quiet life in a city far from Chicago was not surrender, it was strategy. She told herself a great many things in the car on the way back to her apartment. Some of them were even true. By the following Saturday, she had put a deposit on a house in Portland, Oregon. By the following Monday, she had given notice at work, telling her supervisor only that she was relocating for personal reasons. She packed what she needed. She left the rest. She did not call Elliot Crawford. She did not expect him to call her. He did not. She drove to Portland in 4 days, stopping at cheap motels, eating in diners, listening to the radio, and not letting herself think too far ahead. She had a number in a bank account that still did not feel real. She had a body that was doing something enormous and quiet all on its own. She had a plan that was really just a direction, a general heading away from everything that had just happened, and towards something she had not yet figured out how to name. She arrived in Portland on a Thursday afternoon in late February. It was raining. The city smelled like pine and wet concrete. She parked in front of the house she had rented online, without ever seeing it in person, sat in her car for a few minutes with the engine off, and then she picked up her bag and walked inside. She did not cry until she was in the empty kitchen with the lights off and the rain coming down outside the window, and even then, she did not cry for long. She was not the kind of woman who could afford to cry for long. She had work to do. She had 2 children coming. She had a life to build from the ground up, with her own hands, on her own terms, in a city where nobody knew her name, or her history, or what she had signed her name to on the 41st floor of a building in Chicago, on the coldest Tuesday of her adult life. And that, she told herself, wiping her face with the back of her hand in that dark and empty kitchen, was enough. It had to be. Elias and Amara were born on a rainy Wednesday in March, 6 weeks after Nadia arrived in Portland. She labored for 11 hours. Her mother, Gloria, had driven up from Atlanta the week before and was in the room the entire time, holding Nadia's hand and saying the same things she had said when Nadia was a child and something hurt. "You are stronger than this, baby. Just breathe, just breathe." The nurses were kind. The hospital smelled like every hospital in the world. At 4:17 in the afternoon, Elias came first, loud and furious, as if he had an opinion about being born, and it was not a positive one. Amara followed 9 minutes later, quieter, eyes already open, and looking around at the lights with an expression that suggested she was already forming conclusions. Nadia held them both, and did not say anything for a long time. There are moments in life that are so large that language does not fit around them. This was one of those moments. Gloria stood at the side of the bed and cried silently, which was notable because Gloria Osei was not a woman who cried easily. "They are beautiful," Gloria said. "They are," Nadia said. And they were, objectively and absolutely, the most complete thing she had ever done or seen or been part of. She did not think about their father in that room. She made a decision, right there in that hospital bed with 2 newborns on her chest, that she was going to be deliberate about what she allowed into the space she shared with them. She was going to be deliberate about what they were exposed to, what they were told, what she modeled for them through the way she lived. She had made one enormous decision driven by panic and practical math. Every decision after that was going to be different. The first year was the hardest. 2 infants in a rented house in a city where she knew no one except her mother, who stayed for 4 months before her own life in Atlanta called her back. Nadia hired a part-time nanny using the settlement money and felt guilty about it for 6 months, before accepting that guilt was a luxury she could not afford to carry. She slept in pieces. She learned to function on 4 hours and coffee, and the specific motivation that comes from being the only adult in a house where 2 small people need everything from you all at once. She did not fall apart. This was not because she was exceptional. It was because falling apart was not an option she had given herself. By the time the twins were 8 months old, she had started making calls. She had spent 9 years in communications, managing brand narratives, handling media relationships, writing the words that went between corporations and the public. She was good at it. She knew without arrogance, better than good. She called former colleagues. She sent carefully worded emails. She built a small client list from her second bedroom, while Elias and Amara napped, one hand on the laptop and the other on a baby monitor. She named her firm ClearPath Communications. The name was deliberate. Clear, because she had made too many decisions in fog. Path, because she was building one whether or not she could see where it led. Her first client was a small organic food company that needed help with a product recall. She handled it cleanly, without drama, and the CEO sent her a handwritten note afterward that said she had saved them from a crisis they did not deserve. Her second client came through a referral from the first. Her third came through a referral from the second. This was how things grew when they grew honestly, one good decision compounding into the next. By the time the twins were 2, she had 6 clients and 1 full-time employee, a woman named Caroline who had a talent for detail and a dry sense of humor that made long days survivable. By the time they were 4, she had 12 clients and a small office on the east side of the city, with a view of a parking lot and, if you leaned just right, a sliver of Mount Hood on clear days. By the time they were 7, ClearPath Communications had a staff of 12 and a reputation that had quietly spread beyond Portland into the broader Pacific Northwest. Companies in Seattle called her. A pharmaceutical firm in San Francisco retained her for a year. She turned down 2 acquisition offers because she had not built something from nothing in order to hand it to someone else. She was 37 and running a firm that generated 8 figures in revenue annually. She had done this from a second bedroom, from a city where she knew no one, from a starting point of 2 infants and a secret, and a signed agreement, and a check that still sometimes felt unreal, even years after it had been invested and grown into something steady and real. She was proud of herself. She allowed herself that. She had earned it. But pride and loneliness are not mutually exclusive. She knew this intimately. Portland had given her good things, neighbors who became friends, a running group she had joined on a whim and stayed in for 6 years, a book club that met on the second Thursday of every month and argued pleasantly about novels. She had a full life by most reasonable measurements. She had built it brick by brick, deliberately, the way she built everything. What she did not have was a person who knew the whole story. Every relationship she built in Portland was built on the version of herself that began in Portland. The successful single mother, the sharp communications executive, the woman who had moved here for a fresh start, details unspecified. There was no one in her daily life who knew about the 41st floor, no one who knew about the cashier's check, no one who knew that Elliot Crawford, the man whose name appeared regularly in technology and business publications, was the reason her children existed, and the reason he did not know they existed. She had signed an agreement that prevented her from saying it. But the truth was, even without the agreement, she was not sure she could have spoken it. Some things become too large to carry in words. You just carry them in your body instead, in the way you pause before answering certain questions, in the way you change the subject when the topic of fathers comes up at parent-teacher conferences, in the way you learn, over a decade, to live entirely around a silence you have maintained so long it has started to feel like furniture. The twins grew. Elias was a thinker. Quiet, observant, the kind of child who listened to a conversation fully before he decided whether to participate in it. He liked mathematics and maps and a particular documentary series about deep ocean ecosystems that he had watched so many times that Nadia could recite portions of the narration from memory. He was gentle with animals. He was patient with his sister in a way that most 10-year-olds were not capable of being. He made Nadia think of her father, her own father, the air conditioning repairman, who had the same quality of paying attention. Amara was a talker. She had opinions about everything, and she offered them freely, and she was, even at 10, more socially sophisticated than Nadia had been at 20. She read quickly, spoke confidently, and had a way of summarizing complex situations in 3 sentences that made Nadia think she was looking at a future lawyer, or a future journalist, or possibly a future version of herself, though she was careful not to project that last one too loudly. Both of them had their father's eyebrows, the particular angle of them when concentrating, the slight furrow. Nadia had noticed this early, and trained herself not to notice it. She was very good at training herself not to notice things. She had a rule about Elliot Crawford. The rule was simple. She did not search for him online. In 10 years, she had broken this rule 4 times. Once when his company went public and it was impossible to escape the news coverage. Once when a client mentioned his name in a meeting and she had to excuse herself to the bathroom to sit with the sudden rush of something she did not have a clean word for. Once on her 35th birthday, when she had been awake at 2 in the morning for no good reason. Once on the twins' 7th birthday, when she had been sitting at the kitchen table after the party, the house quiet for the first time all day, and she had just wanted to know what he looked like now, whether he had changed, whether the version of him she carried in her memory still matched the version that existed in the world. Each time she searched, she stopped before she read anything. She saw the photo. She closed the browser. That was as far as she let herself go. She was not over him. She had concluded, somewhere around year 4, that she might never be entirely over him, and that this was not a failure. It was just a fact, like the weather, like the shape of the mountain she could see from her office window on clear days. You did not have to be over something to move past it. You just had to keep moving. She kept moving. She built. She raised 2 extraordinary children. She did not look back more than 4 times in 10 years. And then the conference invitation landed in her inbox on an ordinary Tuesday morning in September, and everything that she had built her stillness on began, very quietly, to shift. The invitation came through her office manager, but worded with a note that said this was a significant opportunity for ClearPath's profile in the regional tech space. The Portland Technology Leadership Summit. 3 days, 200 attendees. A venue downtown that Nadia had walked past 100 times. The organizing committee had contacted her firm directly and asked if ClearPath would handle communications strategy for the event itself, coordinating press, managing speaker relations, running the media timeline for all 3 days. It was exactly the kind of work her firm did well. It was a natural fit. Her office manager had already tentatively accepted on her behalf, which was normal. Nadia reviewed the contract, approved it, and assigned the project to Caroline and a junior associate named Peter. She did not read the full speaker list until the morning of the first day. She was standing in the lobby of the venue at 7:45 in the morning, coffee in one hand and a printed schedule in the other, running down the keynote lineup to make sure the timing adjustments they had made the night before were reflected correctly. The summit director, a cheerful man named Graham who communicated exclusively in exclamation points, had sent 3 revised versions of the speaker list in 48 hours, and she wanted to confirm the final order. She ran her eyes down the names. Elliot Crawford, founder and chief executive, Nova Clear Technologies. Keynote address, day 1, 9:30 in the morning. She read it twice. Then she looked up from the paper. The lobby was busy around her. Staff setting up registration tables, attendees beginning to filter in, cameras being tested near the main entrance. The world was moving at its normal speed. She was standing perfectly still in the center of it. She had 45 minutes. She used the first 10 of them to go back to the parking garage and sit in her car. This was not panic. She was very deliberate about that. It was not panic. It was assessment. She needed to assess without anyone watching her face while she did it. The options were clear. She could leave. She could claim illness and hand the event to Caroline and go home and sit in her kitchen and let this particular disaster pass over her like a weather system. This was the clean option. It had costs. It was unprofessional. It would require an explanation she could not honestly give, and it would mean that Elliot Crawford had, without even knowing it, driven her away from work she had earned. She was not willing to let that happen. She could stay and avoid him. The event was large enough. She was the logistics infrastructure, not a speaker or a visible host. She could remain on the periphery, manage the communications work, and leave without ever being in the same room as him for more than 30 seconds. This was the plan she settled on. It was reasonable. It was professional. It was the plan of a woman who had managed difficult circumstances for 10 years, without losing her footing. She walked back into the building at 7:58. She found Caroline near the speaker check-in desk and reviewed the morning's timeline. She confirmed the audio setup for the main hall. She answered 2 emails on her phone while standing in the corridor near the catering setup. She was fine. She was absolutely fine. He arrived at 8:20. She was standing at the media coordinator's table, going over the press access list with Peter, when she heard Graham's voice go up a register, the particular pitch he used when someone important arrived, and she looked up. Elliot Crawford walked into the lobby wearing a dark coat over a fitted gray suit, two members of his communications team following slightly behind him. He was 44 now, and the 10 years showed in the way they show on men who have been under enormous pressure for a long time. The gray at his temples, the particular set of his jaw, a quality of weight to his presence that had not been there before. He had always occupied a room with ease. This was still true. If anything, it was more true. He shook Graham's hand. He smiled at something Graham said. He was turned away from her by about 30 degrees. Peter was saying something about the press access list. She responded to it. She did not look back at the lobby. "Ms. Osei?" Peter said. "Sorry," she said. "Where were we?" She stayed on the opposite side of the room for the next 20 minutes. She moved through her morning duties with the clean efficiency she had developed over a decade of doing this work under pressure. She directed a camera crew to their position. She approved a last-minute biographical change to one speaker's introduction card. She accepted a cup of coffee from a catering staff member and drank half of it without tasting it. Graham found her at 5 minutes to 9. "Our keynote speaker would love to meet the communications lead before he goes on," Graham said, already beaming. He specifically asked. She had known this was coming. She had known it from the moment she read the name on the schedule. She had just hoped for slightly more time. "Of course," she said. Graham led her across the lobby toward the side corridor where speakers gathered before being introduced. Her footsteps were steady. Her face was composed. She had spent 10 years getting very good at composed. They turned the corner into the corridor. Elliot was standing with his back to them, looking at his phone. One of his team members was speaking quietly to him. He turned at the sound of their footsteps. He looked at her. She watched the recognition move through his face, the way a wave moves through water. First the surface registering something, then the understanding catching up beneath it, then the full, complete arrival of knowing exactly who was standing in front of him. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Graham, oblivious to all of it, said, "Elliot, this is Nadia Osei. She runs ClearPath Communications. Her team has been incredible for this summit." Elliot Crawford looked at Nadia Osei. His face was very still. "Ms. Osei," he said. His voice was exactly as she remembered it. "This was inconvenient. I appreciate all the work your team has done." "Thank you," she said. "We're glad to be part of it. Your timing today is tight. You go on at 9:30, and we'd like you at the stage entrance by 9:20. Is there anything you need before then?" He blinked once. It was almost imperceptible. "No," he said. "I think I have everything. Then we'll see you at the stage entrance at 9:20. She smiled at Graham. "Graham, I'll be at the media desk if you need me." She walked back the way she came. She did not let out the breath she was holding until she was around the corner and out of sight. The keynote went without any problems. She monitored it from the media desk at the back of the main hall, watching the press photographers and checking the timing, and doing the work she was paid to do. She did not watch the stage any more than was professionally necessary. He was a good speaker. She had not needed to be reminded of that. He spoke about leadership under scrutiny, about the decisions companies made when visibility was highest, and the temptation to protect image over integrity was strongest. The audience was engaged. People in the third row were taking notes. A journalist to Nadia's left typed without looking up from her laptop for the entire 25 minutes. When it was over, and the applause filled the room, Nadia was already moving toward the corridor to coordinate the next segment. She had 4 things to do in the next 7 minutes. She focused on those. He found her at the media check-in table 30 minutes later. She saw him approaching. She had time to decide whether to stay or move. She stayed. "Nadia," he said, when he reached her. Just her name, without the formal address he had used in front of Graham. "You have a panel at 2 o'clock, she said. "I'll have someone escort you to the prep room at 1:45. "I wanted to. Everything is coordinated from this desk," she said. "If you need anything during the event, anyone on my team can help you." He looked at her. There was something in his face that she could not cleanly read, which was unusual. because she had once been very fluent in his expressions. 10 years had changed the vocabulary. "Do you have 5 minutes?" he asked. "I have 43 minutes accounted for," she said, "and none of them are available right now. If you'll excuse me." She picked up her radio and walked away. It was the most expensive thing she had ever done for free. The second day of the summit was quieter, and Nadia told herself that was the reason she felt steadier. The event had its rhythm now. The logistics were running clean. There were smaller sessions, breakout rooms, a networking lunch that she monitored from the corridor without entering. She had positioned herself efficiently and professionally. She was doing her job. Elliot Crawford made 2 more attempts to speak with her on the second day. The first was during the morning break, when she was standing near the coffee station going through the afternoon's revised schedule on her tablet. She heard him before she saw him. That particular quality of movement, the way certain people carry themselves through a crowd, so that the crowd seems to adjust slightly around them. She looked up. He was making his way toward her with what appeared to be a cup of coffee, and the specific expression of a man who had prepared what he wanted to say. She excused herself before he got within 10 feet. The second attempt was more direct. He had one of his team members pass a handwritten note to Caroline, who brought it to Nadia between sessions with a mildly curious expression. The note said, "Please, coffee. I owe you that much." Nadia folded the note, put it in the pocket of her blazer, and said nothing to Caroline except a question about the afternoon press list. She carried the note in her pocket for the rest of the day. She did not throw it away, which told her something about herself that she chose not to examine too closely. That evening she went home to her house. The twins were at their after-school program, Elias at math team, Amara at the debate club she had joined 3 weeks ago, with the confidence of someone who had been debating her entire life, which she had, primarily with Elias. The house was quiet. Nadia changed out of her work clothes. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen counter and drank it, and thought about the note in her blazer pocket. There was a version of herself that could sit with this, manage it, return to the summit tomorrow, and close the event professionally, and never have a conversation she had not planned for. She was good at that version of herself. She had been living inside it for 10 years. The problem was that it had always been a performance, and she was tired, and the person she was performing it for was now 40 feet away at a conference event she was running, and the note said please. She had not expected please. She had expected avoidance. She had expected the same clinical distance that had sat across from her in the form of 3 lawyers 10 years ago. She had expected the version of him that handled difficult situations through representatives, through documents, through the careful architecture of professional distance. The note said please. She set down her tea. She went to pick up the twins. In the car on the way home from the program, Amara talked without stopping about a debate she had been assigned on technology regulations, and how one of her classmates had made an argument that was, in her words, completely without logic, and I had to explain why. Obviously. Elias sat in the back and looked out the window, and occasionally made dry commentary that made Nadia laugh in spite of everything weighing on her. She cooked dinner, simple pasta. She sat with them and listened to their day. She helped Elias with a geography assignment. She read with Amara for 20 minutes before bed. She turned off the lights in both their rooms. She went back downstairs. She stood in the kitchen and took the note out of her blazer pocket. She read it once more. "Please, coffee. I owe you that much." She put it on the counter. She walked away from it. She was not going to make any decisions tonight. She was going to sleep and return to the summit in the morning and do her job and let the rest sort itself in its own time. That was the plan. The next morning, day 3, she arrived at the venue at 7:30. She coordinated the setup for the closing sessions. She confirmed the audio for the panel rooms. She answered emails. She drank 2 cups of coffee. She felt entirely in control. At noon, during the networking lunch, she was again monitoring from the corridor. Her phone lit up with a photo. It was from her mother. Gloria was watching the twins for the evening. Nadia had asked her to come up from Atlanta for the week to help with school pickups during the summit. The photo was taken in Nadia's kitchen, golden light coming through the window above the sink. The twins standing together in their school uniforms with their backpacks still on. Elias was making a face at the camera. Amara was laughing. Nadia looked at the photo. She looked at it for a long time. She looked at Amara's eyebrows, that particular angle, the slight lift on the left side, the expression beneath the laugh. She looked at the line of Elias's jaw, the way he tilted his head when he was being deliberately ridiculous. She put her phone in her pocket. She went to the closing dinner. The event was winding down by 7 in the evening, the kind of comfortable noise that happens when a conference has gone well, and people are finally allowed to relax. Nadia was at a table near the back with her tablet and the final debrief notes, going through the last of the logistics with Peter. She had chosen the table because it was obscure. She had thought, at the start of the evening, that she was safe there. Elliot found her at 7:15. He came to the table and sat down across from her. He did not ask. He did not introduce himself to Peter. He simply sat, which was either bold or rude, and she had spent too long in this industry to tell the difference. Peter looked at her. She gave him a small nod, and he took his tablet to the opposite corner of the room, with the diplomacy of someone who recognized the atmosphere of a conversation that needed privacy. She did not say anything. She closed her tablet. Elliot Crawford looked at her across the table with an expression she had not seen on his face in 10 years, and had not thought about clearly until right now. He looked tired, in the way that had nothing to do with the hour. He looked like someone who had been carrying something at the edge of his capacity for longer than he wanted to admit. "I am not going to say I was shocked to see you," he said. "I would be lying." "Were you warned?" she said. "No. But I was not entirely surprised either." He paused. "I have thought about you a great deal, Nadia. You handled that thoughtfulness very efficiently 10 years ago," she said. He did not look away. "I know what I did." "Do you?" "I have had 10 years to understand it clearly." She looked at him. The restaurant noise moved around them, and none of it was relevant. "What would you like from this conversation, Elliot?" she said. "I want to understand what outcome you are looking for." "I don't want an outcome," he said. "I want to apologize." "You want to apologize?" "Yes." "For which part?" He held her gaze. "All of it," he said. "The way it was handled, the way it ended. I was a man who made a decision I did not have the courage to make myself, so I let lawyers make it for me, and I have never fully resolved what that says about who I was in that period of my life." Nadia looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and took out her phone. She found the photo her mother had sent. The twins in the kitchen, afternoon light, Elias making a face, Amara laughing. She set the phone on the table, face up, in the space between them. She did not say a word. She watched his face. She watched him look at the photo. She watched his eyes move across it carefully, the way eyes move when the brain is doing something more than simply seeing. She watched him look at Amara's face. She watched him look at Elias. She watched the expression that moved through him then, slow and unannounced, the expression of a man arriving somewhere he had not known he was traveling toward. The table was quiet. The restaurant moved around them. He looked up at her. His voice, when it came, was lower than his normal register. "How old?" he said. 10, she said. He looked back down at the photo. Neither of them said anything for a very long time. She drove home in silence. She had not made any decisions in that restaurant. She had shown him a photograph. She had answered one question with one word. And then she had said she needed to close out the event, and she had stood up, and she had walked away, and she had spent the next 90 minutes doing precisely that, closing the event, shaking Graham's hand, thanking her team, signing the final vendor paperwork, with the specific focus of a woman whose life had just divided itself, quietly and irreversibly, into before that moment and after it. The house was quiet when she got home. Her mother was asleep. The twins were asleep. She stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the ordinary silence of a house where children were resting, and then she went to the kitchen and sat down at the table in the dark. She sat there for a long time. She was not afraid. Exactly. She had been afraid before and she knew its texture. This was different. This was the specific alertness that comes when you understand that a thing you have been managing in one direction for a decade has shifted, and you have not yet figured out in which direction it will now move. Elliot Crawford called her the next morning at 8. She had expected him to call. She had expected lawyers. She had half expected that the call would be from his legal team rather than from him directly, and she had spent part of the night preparing herself for that possibility. But it was his number. She had not deleted it from her phone, which she noted without judgment. She answered. "I want to do this correctly," he said. "No greeting. Just that." "What does correctly mean to you?" she said. "It means I do not make any decisions without your involvement. I do not contact you or your children without your agreement. I do not engage legal processes unless you initiate them. And I want to say clearly that I am not calling to manage this situation." She was standing in her kitchen. Her coffee was getting cold in front of her. "Then what are you calling to do?" she said. "To ask you what you need," he said. "That is all." She had not expected that either. She did not respond for a moment. Outside the kitchen window, Portland was doing what Portland did in October. Pale light, low clouds, the kind of morning that felt like the city was thinking something over. "I need time," she said. "You have it. I need to talk to a family attorney before any other conversations happen. Of course. And I need you to understand that whatever comes next is shaped first by what is right for Elias and Amara. Not by what is convenient for you, and not entirely by what I want either. They are 10 years old. They are whole people. Whatever we do happens around them, not to them." There was a pause on the line. When he spoke again, his voice was careful and genuine in equal measure. "I understand," he said. "I want you to know that I am not the same person who sat on the other side of that table and let other people handle what I should have handled myself." "People say that," she said. "I know they do. Showing it is different from saying it. I know that too." She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. "I will have my attorney contact you within the week," she said. "I will be ready whenever you are," he said. She ended the call. She stood in the kitchen and tried to take the measure of what she felt. It was not simple. It had not been simple in 10 years, and it was not about to become simple now. There was anger that had lived in her long enough to feel structural. There was something more complicated beneath the anger, something she could not name cleanly, something that had to do with the photograph on the restaurant table, and the way his face had moved through recognition, and the word please, on a handwritten note she still had not thrown away. There was Elias, who liked maps and ocean documentaries, and had his grandfather's quality of attention. There was Amara, who argued with confidence, and laughed at everything, and had eyebrows that told Nadia, every single morning over breakfast, exactly what she was not supposed to think about. There were two children who had grown up with one parent, who had been entirely present and entirely devoted, and who had never asked the question directly, though Nadia knew it was there, waiting in the particular quietness that children carry around the things they are not sure they are allowed to raise. She consulted an attorney named Barbara, who was precise and calm, and had spent 20 years in family law. They met 3 times in the following 2 weeks. Barbara reviewed the original non-disclosure agreement, which had been drafted against the possibility of exactly this situation, and she explained clearly which of its provisions were enforceable and which had become more complicated given the existence of minor children whose interests could not be legally subordinated to a civil agreement signed before their birth. The original $20 million sat in accounts Nadia had managed carefully. It had grown, through conservative investment, into something larger. That was not relevant to the legal question, but Barbara raised it carefully because it was relevant to the practical one. Nadia was not approaching this situation from a position of need. She was approaching it from a position of independence, and that changed everything. The conversations with Elliot's attorneys, different ones from the original 3, younger, and noticeably less practiced at delivering bad news calmly, were professional and ultimately productive. There were no threats. There were no dramatic confrontations. There was the careful, slow work of people who understood that 2 children's lives were at the center of this, and that carelessness was something none of them could afford. Elliot was exactly what he had said on the phone. He did not push. He did not attempt to establish a presence in the twins' lives before Nadia had agreed to any terms. He did not attempt to manage the situation publicly or through the media, though she knew he was aware that the story existed in the world as a risk. He waited. He responded when she reached out. He was not performing patience. She had known him well enough and long enough to tell the difference between performance and the genuine article. She hated, slightly, that this was true. It would have been simpler if he had been exactly who she remembered him being 10 years ago, clean and cold and processed through lawyers. People were supposed to confirm what you already believed about them. It was easier when they did. In mid-November, 7 weeks after the summit, she sat Elias and Amara down on the living room couch on a Saturday morning and she told them. She told them as simply and honestly as she could, using language that was truthful without being more than they needed to carry. She told them that their father was someone she had known a long time ago, that the two of them had not been in each other's lives, and that their father did not know about them until recently. She told them that he very much wanted to meet them, and that it would entirely be their choice whether that meeting happened and when. Elias listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where does he live?" "Chicago," she said, "but he travels frequently." "What does he do?" "He runs a technology company." Elias nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was organizing information. "Okay," he said. Amara had been quiet throughout, which was unusual enough that Nadia had been watching her carefully. When she finally spoke, what she said was, "Are you okay, Mama?" Nadia looked at her daughter. "Yes," she said, "I am." "You look a little like you might cry," Amara said. "I am fine," Nadia said. And then she did cry. Just a little. And both her children moved closer on the couch, one on each side of her, which was the most helpful thing either of them could have done. The meeting was arranged for the first Saturday in December, in a park near Nadia's house. She had chosen the location. She had the option of a more formal setting, a therapist's office, a family mediator's conference room, but she thought a park was better, open, neutral, easy to leave. She drove them there herself. Elias sat in the front seat and looked out the window. Amara sat in the back and talked the entire way, not about what they were going to do, but about a book she had been reading, as if this were a normal Saturday, as if talking at her normal volume about a fictional story was the best way to get all of them to the place they were going, without anyone falling apart. Nadia loved her daughter deeply for this. Elliot was already there when they arrived. He was standing near a bench close to the park entrance, wearing a coat she did not recognize, and he was alone. This also mattered. She had told him no team, no representatives, nobody from his orbit, and he had honored that. She got out of the car. Elias and Amara got out. She walked them across the grass toward the bench. The morning was cold and pale and the park smelled like pine and winter, and the particular quality of air that only December in the Pacific Northwest carries. Elliot Crawford turned toward them. She watched him see them in person for the first time. She watched what that looked like on someone's face. It was not something she could have described efficiently or cleanly afterward. It was the expression of a person confronting the full weight of time, of a decade that had passed without something in it, that was turning out to have been essential. Elias looked at him and then looked at Nadia. She nodded once. Elias looked back at Elliot, walked forward, and extended his hand. "Hi," he said. "I am Elias." Elliot shook his son's hand. "Hi, Elias," he said. His voice was steady. His eyes were not entirely. Nadia had promised herself she would not cry in front of them. She stood 20 yards back, watching, with Amara beside her, and she kept that promise for approximately 4 minutes. Amara slipped her hand into Nadia's without being asked. They stood together and watched. It was not a fairy tale. It was not a resolution. It was two children in a park in December, meeting a stranger who happened to share their bone structure, while their mother stood at a careful distance with cold hands and a decade of complicated love, and an absolutely clear understanding that the most important decision she had ever made was not signing that document on the 41st floor of a Chicago skyscraper. It was this: standing here, raising them this well, making sure they were solid enough to walk across a park and introduce themselves to the unknown without flinching. The $20 million had given her the ground to stand on. She understood that. She had used it honestly and without waste, and she did not pretend it had not mattered. But it had not made her life. She had made her life. In the weeks that followed, there were conversations between Elliot and the twins. Short calls, then longer ones. then an in-person visit to Portland in January that Nadia supervised at a distance, and then, gradually, less at a distance. There was no rush. There was no script. There were two children who processed new information at their own pace, and one man who appeared to understand, genuinely, that he had no standing to demand more access than what was given to him, and that what was given to him was a gift, not a right. Nadia watched all of it carefully. She remained the authority in the room on everything that mattered. She had not spent 10 years building herself into someone steady and capable in order to let someone else become the center of gravity in her children's lives without earning it. But she also watched Elias ask Elliot about technology, and she watched Elliot ask Elias about the Ocean documentary series, and she watched them find, slowly and without announcement, something that resembled a conversational rhythm. She watched Amara interview Elliot at the kitchen table one Sunday afternoon, with the focused intensity of someone conducting research, asking him questions about his childhood and his company, and whether he thought he had been a good person in his life. She watched him answer honestly, which meant acknowledging, clearly, in front of Nadia and both children, that there had been periods where he had not been. Amara had nodded at this with the expression of a person who respected a straight answer. "That is honest," she had said. "People who say they have always been good are usually the least good." Nadia had looked out the kitchen window so nobody would see her almost smile. It was not clean. There was still anger in her, real and legitimate, that did not dissolve, because he showed up with patience and a genuine attempt at accountability. There were nights when she sat with the full weight of what 10 years had cost the three of them, not in money, not in security, but in time, in presence, in the particular things that can only happen in a family that is whole, and she felt the unfairness of it clearly and without apology. She did not forgive easily. She was not sure she was built for easy forgiveness, but she was building something functional, practical, real, a structure that centered her children and kept her own foundation intact. Forgiveness, if it came, would arrive at its own pace, through actions and not declarations. She was, above all, a deliberate woman. She had been one since the kitchen in Portland, in February, 10 years ago, when she had decided that whatever she became from that point forward was going to be built by her own hands. She was still building. The night of the January visit, after Elliot had left and the twins were in bed and the house was quiet, she stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the dark garden and the street beyond it. Portland was doing what Portland did in January, quiet and rain-gray and entirely itself. She was 36 when she drove into this city with $2,000 in her personal account and $20 million in a new one, and two children growing quietly inside her. She was now 37, and then 38, and then 39, and then 40. She had done things with every year that she was proud of. She had built a company, raised extraordinary people, made a name for herself in an industry that did not make names easy, and she had done it without anyone's permission or assistance or presence. The 20 million had been a starting point. She had not wasted it. But the life, the actual life, was not the 20 million. The life was every decision she had made after signing that document. Every morning she had gotten up when she was tired and afraid and uncertain. Every moment she had chosen building over bitterness. Every time she had looked at her children and decided they deserved a mother who was present and whole, and not consumed by a wound she had not asked for. The check had bought her silence. She had built everything else herself. She thought about the 41st floor. She thought about the silver-haired lawyer and the envelope with her name written in someone else's hand. She thought about the version of herself who had sat in that room at 26, with her hands steady on a 44-page document, and made a decision in 40 minutes that had shaped 3 lives. She did not regret the life she had built. What she felt, standing at the window in January, while her children slept, was something quieter and more specific than regret. It was the recognition of time, of what it cost, of what could not be recovered from it, of the way it moved in one direction regardless of what you wanted. She had always known this. She was very good at living inside that knowledge, without letting it hollow her out. But she felt it clearly tonight, in the particular way that clarity arrives after something large has finally settled. She had given 10 years to a silence she had not chosen, in a life she had built entirely from it, raising two people who were everything she had bet on when she was still young enough to be afraid of the bet. She had not lost, but she understood, standing at the window with the rain coming down outside and her children asleep upstairs, that winning and losing were both incomplete words for what her life had actually been. Her life had been real, fully, completely, sometimes painfully, often beautifully real. She turned off the kitchen light. She went upstairs. Her children were there. That had always been enough. It was still enough now.